She wanted a change of look, so she removed her burgundy hairstyle and revealed her natural 4C hair, beautifully styled. Se-yeon Park had built her entire career on the principle that details told the truth before people did. The weight distribution of a typeface, the tension between negative space and form, the way a color shifted depending on what you placed beside it. She had always been better at reading the things people arranged than the things they said out loud, and she was sitting at her kitchen counter on a Tuesday morning staring at a dry cleaning tag that was rearranging everything she thought she knew. It was small, white, the kind of thing that falls out of a jacket pocket when you pull it off a hook too fast and lands on the counter without ceremony, without announcement, without any awareness of what it was about to do. The restaurant name printed on the back was a Korean BBQ place 2 blocks from Apex Creative House. Se-yeon recognized it the way you recognize a place you've been trying not to think about, the way your body processes a name before your brain gives it permission to do. She had been there exactly once, 3 weeks ago, on a Thursday evening when the rest of the office had already gone home, and she had followed Min-jun Kwon out onto Peachtree Street because she was hungry and because she had stopped pretending she didn't want to. Marcus was in the shower. She could hear the water running, the familiar sound of him taking exactly 11 minutes, which she knew because she had lived with this man for 2 years, and you learn a person's rhythms whether you intend to or not. She stared at the tag. She did not touch it. She was thinking very carefully about whether the problem was the tag itself or the fact that when she saw it, her first feeling was not guilt. It was something closer to being caught in a truth she had been quietly telling herself for weeks and hoping nobody else would notice. She left for work before he came out of the bathroom. She told herself that was because she had a 7:30 briefing. She had a 7:30 briefing. That part was true. The 3 weeks before that morning had been the best professional stretch of Se-yeon's life, and she was self-aware enough to find that suspicious. She had delivered the first full concept for the brand identity on the Thursday Min-jun had demanded, and she had walked into that conference room with the clean, quiet confidence of someone who had done the work so thoroughly that doubt had simply run out of room. The concept was built around tension, the push and pull between structure and spontaneity, between the rigid grid and the hand-drawn mark, between what a thing was built to be and what it was becoming. It was, she realized later, a more personal piece of work than she had intended. She had presented it and let it speak, and when Min-jun said the single word yes and moved to the next agenda item with that unreadable economy of expression he carried everywhere, Dana shot her a look across the table that said, in the compressed language of professional women who have been in a room together long enough, that was it. That was the one. After that, the project moved fast the way good things do when every person in the room actually knows what they're doing. Se-yeon had full ownership of the visual identity system, the typography, the color language, the spatial logic of how everything sat together. Min-jun's team sent reference materials weekly, and she worked through them methodically, cross-referencing against her concept direction, pulling threads, building. She worked late most evenings, and she did not think too hard about the fact that Min-jun's site visits had started happening more often than the project technically required. The site visits were professional. She needed to say that clearly and mean it because they were. He came in, he reviewed, he gave feedback that was precise and visually literate in a way she had never experienced from a client, and was still, 3 weeks in, slightly overwhelmed by, and then he left. He did not linger. He did not manufacture reasons to stay. He was respectful in a way that was almost formal, and the only thing that sat sideways was the texting, which had continued in the specific register of 2 people who have both noticed something and are both choosing carefully not to name it out loud. She had texted him a photo of a reference print she'd found at a vintage shop near her apartment, a 1970s Korean film poster with a graphic language that was almost exactly the tension she'd been trying to articulate in the identity system, and he'd responded within 3 minutes. "Where did you find that?" She said, "The shop on Edgewood." He said, "I'll send someone for it." She said, "You don't have to do that." He said, "I know." He sent someone anyway. 2 days later, a copy of the poster arrived at Apex Creative House in a flat protective sleeve with no note. Dana picked it up from reception and set it on Se-yeon's desk with one raised eyebrow and the self-control of a woman who had decided not to say the thing she was thinking. She had put it in her portfolio drawer and not looked at it again. She had thought about it constantly. Then his team sent the archival file. It came in on a Wednesday afternoon, a shared folder of historical photographs and documents that Min-jun's operations team had pulled together as reference context for the entertainment subsidiary's brand narrative. Se-yeon opened it the way she opened all reference files, methodically, starting from the oldest material and working forward. The early photographs were formal, corporate, the kind of images that companies commission when they want to look established. She scrolled through them without stopping until she reached a folder labeled simply Personal Origin. She almost didn't open it. It was the kind of label that suggests it was included by accident, something someone meant to keep separate that got swept into the share. But she was a designer building a brand story, and origin was precisely what she needed, so she opened it. There were 7 photographs. The first 3 were of a laundry shop, small and clean, the signage hand-lettered in Korean above the door. The interior showed racks of pressed clothes, lined with the precision of someone who took enormous pride in work that other people considered invisible. The 4th photograph was the one that stopped her. A young woman, maybe 40, standing in front of a large industrial pressing machine with the posture of someone who owned not just the equipment, but the room. She was lean and focused, and beautiful in the way that people who have worked hard all their lives and stopped apologizing for it are beautiful. And she had the specific stillness in her expression that she recognized because she had seen it on someone else's face every time she walked into a room and said something that didn't need to be repeated. The 5th photograph was Min-jun. He was young, 17 or 18 maybe, seated at a small table in the back of the shop with what looked like a school textbook open in front of him and a sleeping cat pressed against his thigh. He was not looking at the camera. He was reading. The tattoos were not there yet. His hair was dark and unstyled, and he looked in a way that Se-yeon felt land somewhere behind her sternum, completely unguarded. Like a person before he learned how much it cost to let people see him. The 6th photograph was both of them together, mother and son, standing outside the shop in what looked like early evening light. She had her arm around him, and he was letting her, which meant he was still young enough not to have decided that kind of softness was something to protect against. They were both looking at something outside the frame, and they were both almost smiling, that near smile she now knew well, the family resemblance made suddenly and completely plain. The 7th photograph was not a photograph. It was a scan of a handwritten document, a single page, Korean script, and at the bottom a hand-drawn crane, mid-flight, fine, deliberate ink. The same crane that lived on Min-jun's left forearm, transferred from paper to skin with exact fidelity. The document was dated 19 years ago. Hi besties, my audiobook is finally out, and you all made this possible. I have been reading your comments asking for spicy and uncensored stories, and it is finally here. Link in bio and in the description. Now let's get back. Se-yeon sat very still at her desk for a long time. She understood then fully and completely what this project was. The entertainment subsidiary was not a business acquisition. It was a monument. Min-jun had built an entire company as a container for his mother's name, her work, her dignity, the 12-hour shifts and the pressed clothes, and the pride that embarrassed him when he was young, and now sat at the center of everything. He had handed this to her to design. He had handed this to Se-yeon specifically, without explanation, without telling her what it meant, and she had understood it anyway because she had looked at the reference file his team sent without knowing what she was about to find, and the design she had already built was somehow already correct. She didn't tell him she'd found the photographs. She went back into her design files and she worked for 4 straight hours with that knowledge sitting in her chest like ballast. And the work that came out of those 4 hours was different. Not better, exactly. More honest, more rooted. She adjusted the typographic weight to carry more gravity. She shifted the primary color a single tone warmer. She changed the spatial rhythm of the layout grid to something that breathed more deliberately, like a person breathes when they are saying something they mean. When she stepped back and looked at the full system spread across her screen, it felt, for the first time, like something that deserved to last. Min-jun arrived for the review the following Tuesday. His two associates sat in their usual positions. Dana stood at the back of the room in her usual posture of contained evaluation. Seon presented the refined direction, walking through each decision with the careful logic of someone who had earned every choice. She was 3 slides from the end when she reached the slide that showed the full identity system assembled together for the first time, the typography and color and spatial language all operating simultaneously, and she heard Min-jun go very still in a way that was different from his usual stillness. She kept presenting. She finished the slide. She clicked to the final frame. The room was quiet. "Where did you get the reference for the weight shift in the typography?" he said. His voice was exactly what it always was, controlled, even. She could not have told you why she heard something different in it. "The archival file your team sent," she said. "There was a folder labeled personal. I wasn't sure if it was included intentionally." I met his eyes directly. "I thought it might have been a mistake, but I'm a designer. I couldn't not open it." One of his associates started to speak. Min-jun raised one hand slightly and his associate stopped. He looked at the presentation on the screen for a long moment, then he looked at Seon. "You understood what this was." Not a question. "I think I did." Another silence. Dana was watching him with the careful attention she gave to everything that mattered. His associates were watching their own hands. Min-jun looked at the assembled identity system on the screen one last time, the way you look at something you have been carrying for a very long time and have finally been able to set down in the right place. "Approved," he said. "All of it. Full face." He collected his documents. "Build it out." He left before she could say anything else. She sat in the conference room after everyone had filed out and put both hands flat on the table and breathed, because what had just happened in that room was not only professional, and she was not foolish enough to pretend otherwise. She was also not in a position to do anything about it, because Marcus was home, and the dry cleaning tag was still on her kitchen counter where she had left it that morning, and she had a life she had built that she was not ready to examine too closely. Not yet. She was wrong about the yet. The yet came sooner than she was ready for, and it did not arrive the way she expected. It was a Friday morning, 10 days after the review, when Dana called her into the office. Dana's office was always orderly, in the specific way of people who think clearly and need their environment to match. Everything in its place, no decoration for decoration's sake. Seo-yeon liked that about her. She sat down in the chair across from the desk and noticed immediately that Dana's expression was not its usual composed precision. It was something more careful, more deliberate, like a person choosing the order of information before they deliver it. Dana slid a printed email across the desk without saying anything first. She let Seo-yeon pick it up and read it. It was from Apex's IT director, a flagged anomaly in the server logs. A forwarding rule, set up quietly and not recently, that had been redirecting certain outgoing files to an external address. Concept files, timeline documents, client pricing structures, the kind of material that a competing agency would find very useful and that Apex's clients would find catastrophic if they knew was circulating. The login attached to the forwarding rule was Seo-yeon's own. Seo-yeon read the email twice. Her face did not move. She put it back on Dana's desk. "I didn't set that up," she said. "I know. The timestamp pattern doesn't match your work hours. You're here until 8 or 9 most nights, and the rule was activated at 2 in the afternoon on a day you were in client presentations from 1 to 5. Your login, not your hands." She paused. "Someone had access to your credentials." The number of people who had access to her credentials was not large. She used the same password pattern she'd used since college, which was a thing she had been meaning to fix for 2 years. She had her work login saved on her personal laptop. Her personal laptop lived on the kitchen table at home, and she did not keep it in a bag because she had never previously had a reason to treat it like a thing that needed protecting inside her own apartment. She thanked Dana. She went back to her desk. She sat in front of her screen for 45 minutes without opening anything. She was doing the quiet internal arithmetic that people do when they already know the answer to something and are taking one last moment before they have to look at it directly. She thought about Marcus, about the vagueness, not the warm, scattered vagueness of someone who was simply not a detail-oriented person, but a specific, consistent vagueness about certain things. His freelance clients, whom she had never met, and whose names changed in casual conversation in ways she had noticed but not cataloged. The period 8 months ago when he was suddenly, briefly, flush with cash that he had explained as a late invoice clearing, and she had not asked which client because she was deep in a deadline, and because you don't interrogate the person you love over a paid invoice. The way he had in 4 years never once asked her a specific question about a client project. Not the name of a client, not the nature of a brief, not the details of anything she was actually building. He asked if she was okay. He asked if she'd eaten. He said she was incredible, and he meant it. She believed that part, but he had never once been curious about the work itself. She had told herself that was because he wasn't a creative and it wasn't his world. She sat at her desk on that Friday afternoon and understood that she had been very useful to someone who had never actually needed to ask questions out loud. She went home. She made dinner. She talked about nothing in particular, and Marcus was warm and present and made her laugh twice about something stupid that happened to him on the train. And she watched him like you watch a performance when you've just learned you're the only person in the room who has read the whole script. She waited until he fell asleep. She took her personal laptop from the kitchen table and she opened his email, which he had never once thought to password protect because he had never once considered her a threat, and she found what she was looking for in 11 minutes. 3 emails, sent over the previous 4 months, to an address at a firm called Meridian Creative Group, which she had heard of because they were one of Apex's direct competitors and pitched against them for 3 major accounts in the past year. Each email contained attachments. She recognized the file names. 2 of them were early concept explorations she'd walked Marcus through at the kitchen table one evening when she was excited about the direction, and he listened with his chin in his hand and said, "Babe, that's so smart. You're so talented." The third was a timeline document with client rates that she had been revising on her laptop one afternoon while he watched television 4 feet away. She did not cry. She noted that fact about herself with a kind of distant curiosity. She felt a cold, clarifying anger that was nothing like the hot grief she might have expected, and somewhere beneath it, a bone-deep exhaustion that she recognized as the feeling of having carried something heavy for a long time and finally being allowed to put it down, even though the putting down hurt more than the carrying had. She closed the laptop. She sat on the couch in the dark for a long time. Then she got up, went to the bedroom, and came back with the bag she took to conferences, the good one with the wide shoulder strap, and she began with the methodical focus of a woman who was a professional at making decisions about what belonged together and what did not, to pack it. She was at the door when Marcus woke up. She heard him sit up, heard the specific, confused sound of a person who has just registered that something is wrong before they know what it is. He came to the bedroom doorway and looked at her standing in the hall with her bag on her shoulder and her keys in her hand. And even then, even half asleep, she watched the calculation move across his face, the brief flicker of someone deciding which version of this to try first. "Sion," he said. "What's happening?" She had planned to be measured. She had planned to lay it out the way she laid out a client presentation, structured, evidenced, clean. Instead, she said the only thing that was actually true. "You used my work to fund your life and called it support." He started talking. Of course he did. It came out in the way these things always do, a mixture of genuine remorse and convenient framing. Financial pressure, temporary, he was going to fix it, he loved her, it was never about her, he got into something he couldn't get out of, the people at Meridian had approached him, it had only been 3 times. He said the thing people say when they are sorry they were caught. "I never thought it would affect you this badly." She listened to all of it. She let him finish. Then she opened the front door and walked out, and the sound of it closing behind her was the quietest thing that had ever been that loud. She called Dana from the parking garage. Dana answered on the second ring, which told Sion that Dana had been waiting, which told Sion that Dana already knew more than she'd shown in that office meeting. She told Dana everything, all of it. Marcus, the laptop, the emails, the timeline of access. Dana was silent for exactly the length of time it took to absorb it and make several decisions simultaneously. "Come in tomorrow," she said. "Not early. Come in at 10. Sleep first." Then, in a tone that was softer than anything Sion had heard from her in 2 months, "You did the right thing. This was never your failure." Sion sat in her car in the parking garage for a while after they hung up, and the thing she felt most clearly, beneath the anger and the grief and the particular vertigo of a life reorganizing itself around a new truth, was a kind of relief so profound it almost embarrassed her. She had not known how much weight she was moving through every day until she set it down on the concrete floor of a parking garage at 11:30 on a Friday night and felt her own feet on the ground. She stayed with her friend Adeza that weekend, which meant she spent 48 hours eating rice and stew, being told she was too good for mediocre love in 3 different registers, and working on her laptop at Adeza's kitchen table while Adeza played music at a volume that was slightly too loud to think to and was entirely the right choice. By Sunday night, she had the first full phase of the brand identity build 70% complete, and she had found a small 1-bedroom apartment 2 miles from Apex Creative House that she could afford on her own salary, without calculations, without adjusting for someone else's gaps. She sent the rental application from Adeza's kitchen table. Then she opened a fresh sketchbook and drew for an hour for no reason, except that she wanted to. Her grandmother had told her that composition was composition, whether it was on a plate or a page, and a woman who knew what she was making always knew why she was making it. She had not drawn simply for the pleasure of it in longer than she could cleanly name. She did not text Minjun. She was aware of that choice in a way that felt important. Monday morning, she arrived at Apex at 10 o'clock as Dana had said, and she walked in with the particular composure of someone who has cried all they need to cry and arrived at the clean floor beneath it. Dana was waiting in her office. She walked Sion through what the IT team had confirmed, what legal had been consulted about, and what Apex's position was. The evidence was clear. Meridian Creative Group had been in receipt of proprietary materials. The remedies available included civil action against Marcus, a formal complaint against Meridian, and a breach notification process with the affected clients. Sion asked what Minjun's team had been told. Dana said they had been informed of a security incident and that an investigation was underway. She said it the way people say things when they are technically accurate and materially incomplete, and Sion heard both parts. The brand identity launched 6 weeks later. Sion had never worked harder on anything in her life, and the thing she made was the kind of work that happened when a person stopped hedging and committed fully to what they actually believed. The identity system was singular and grounded and completely itself. It had the weight of something that meant to stay. The industry response was immediate. 2 trade publications reached out to Apex for comment. 3 prospective clients mentioned it in inquiry calls. Dana walked past Sion's desk the day the second press mention came in and set down a single printed page, her 30-day probationary review, formally marked complete, with a handwritten note in Dana's precise cursive at the bottom, permanent lead effective immediately. Sion held that page for a moment and then pinned it above her desk. It was 3 weeks after the launch, on a Thursday afternoon, when Dana told her the rest of it. She came to Sion's desk without preamble, sat in the chair beside it, and said, "There's something you should know about how this resolved." She explained that shortly after the security incident had been flagged, before Dana had even brought it to Sion directly, Minjun's team had identified the anomaly independently. His security operation had flagged the unusual forwarding pattern during a routine audit of all systems connected to the Quan Group acquisition. They had traced it to the external address. They had identified the recipient. They had the full picture before Dana had the printed email ready to slide across the desk. Minjun made a decision at that point that his legal team had advised against, and his associates had questioned, and he had overridden without discussion. He had not pursued legal action against Marcus. He had not filed the formal breach complaint that would have attached Sion's name permanently to a security incident at the start of her career at this agency. He had handled Meridian Creative Group through other channels, the nature of which Dana said she did not have full visibility into and did not intend to pursue visibility into. He had ensured that the story, legally and publicly, was a contained system breach, not a named designer leak. Her career was intact. Her name was clean. He had made that happen before she ever knew there was something that needed protecting. Sayan was quiet for a long moment. "He knew before I did?" she said. "Yes," Dana said. "And he didn't tell me?" Dana looked at her with the expression of someone who has been watching two people orbit each other for 2 months and is choosing her words with exceptional care. "He said it wasn't his story to end, that it was yours." After Dana left, Se-yeon sat at her desk looking at her screen without seeing it. She thought about a man who ran 3 legitimate companies and 2 that required considerably less paperwork, who had all the resources in the world to make a problem disappear loudly, who had instead made it disappear in a way that left her standing exactly where she'd worked to stand, untouched and fully credited. She thought about the crane on his forearm. Longevity. Long commitment to what you choose. She thought about the difference between a person who tells you what they would do for you and a person who simply does it and says nothing. She picked up her phone. She typed, "I know what you did. I know how you handled it." She held the phone for a moment. Then she added, "Thank you." And then, because she was a woman who had spent her entire life being precise about what things meant, and this deserved precision, not just for this, for all of it, for treating the project like it mattered, it did. He replied 7 minutes later, "It always mattered." Then, after a pause just long enough to be intentional, "You always knew that." She put her phone face down on her desk and felt something settle in her chest, not with urgency, not with the vertigo of something starting, but with the slow, grounded quality of something that had been true for a while and had finally found a place to stand. Her new apartment had west-facing windows that went orange in the late afternoon, and she had put a drafting table in front of them. On it lived the sketchbook she had been building since she was 19, the graphic novel that had always been the thing she was saving for when she had enough of herself to give it. She had started working on it in earnest 3 weeks ago. The story was about a woman who had always been good at reading the things people arranged, rather than the things they said, and what happened when she finally trusted herself to read her own life with the same precision. She was on page 47. She had never gotten past page 12 before. Above her drafting table, she had hung one print, a crane mid-flight, fine ink on white, a copy she had made of the original design from the archival photograph after the launch. It caught the afternoon light and held it. Her phone buzzed. She picked it up without checking herself. Min-June. The launch review from the trade press is out. Direction 2 was right. She smiled at that, the private, specific pleasure of being understood. She typed back, "Direction 2 was always right. You just needed someone to show you the bones of it." A pause, then his reply, "Yes, I did." She put her phone in her bag. She picked up her pencil. Outside, Atlanta moved through its evening in the particular golden way it did in October, loud and restless and full of possibility, and Se-yeon Park drew in the last of the afternoon light with the deliberate attention of a woman who had finally decided that her own life deserved the same care she gave everything else. She was on page 48. She did not intend to stop. Y'all, he protected her career before she even knew it needed protecting, and he never said a word. If you felt that land, leave a comment right now saying Direction 2 was always right, because you understand exactly what that means. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because this is not the end of this story, not even close. In the next part, Min-June is going to show up at that drafting table. There is a file on his desk with a name in it that changes the shape of everything, and Se-yeon is going to have to decide whether the thing she's been building for herself has room for someone who has been quietly, carefully, without any announcement at all, building toward her. Hi besties, my audiobook is finally out and you all made this possible. I have been reading your comments asking for spicy and uncensored stories, and it is finally here. Link in bio and in the description.